Unlike most European countries that were colonized by a single empire like the British or the French, Canada's history is peculiar as it was colonized by both the British and the French empires, making its modern structure to be recognized officially as a country that is largely diverse in terms of languages spoken. Today, we will be diving into the history of Canada, covering two major languages and how they helped shape the modern-day Canada we know. The region of Canada was first colonized by the French Empire, and it got its name from a French explorer called Jacques Cartier, who used the name Canada to refer to the area around the settlement known as Quebec City. After the conquest of New France by the British in 1759, when New France's stronghold, Montreal, surrendered to the British, the city of Quebec continued to hold its French culture and values. They practiced Catholicism and had their own civil law, while the conquerors of New France practiced Protestantism and followed a common law system. As a result, the British were able to control the territories politically, but the French were still in their cultural roots. To make things easier for the British, they decided to authorize French language and culture in Quebec, but within their control. In 1774, the British passed the Quebec Law, which guaranteed the practice of Catholicism in Quebec and allowed for French civil law in private matters, while in public administrative matters, the British common law was to be applied. The name Quebec was often used instead of Canada for a while until 1791, when the name Canada got fully restored. It happened when the old Quebec City got divided into upper and lower provinces. The two provinces were later named Canada West and Canada East, while being called Canada collectively. In July 1840, the British Parliament passed the Act of Union Bill. The bill saw the creation of the province of Canada by uniting Canada West and Canada East into one government. This recognized the existence of both the British and the French side by side, but with the intention that the French Canadians would accept and integrate the British culture. It was a bold and smart move by the British. It was during this period that the British introduced their parliamentary system, including in Quebec, but the French language and Catholicism still remain rooted in Quebec. The British kept making smart political moves to ensure that they had occupied Canada both politically and culturally. In 1867, known as the Year of Confederation, the British Parliament passed the British North America Act, which united three British colonies, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the province of Canada comprising Ontario and Quebec, and named them the Dominion of Canada. With such development, the idea that English and French-speaking communities should exist side by side and complete each other. English and French were defined as official languages of the Canadian Parliament, the courts, and also in the Quebec legislature and courts. The Dominion status allowed Canada a large measure of self-rule, but with matters pertaining to international diplomacy and military alliances solely controlled by the British. It wasn't until 1931 that Canada became completely self-governing under British rule and later gained its full legislative independence in 1982 and the right to amend its constitution. Fast forward to 1969, the Canadian federal government passed the first Official Languages Act after the recommendation of the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism. The act proclaimed French and English to be the official languages of Canada. As stated in the act, all federal institutions must provide services and other operations in both English and French, mostly depending on the subject requested. For the smooth implementation of this, the Office of Commissioner of Official Languages was created. The main aim of the act was to provide federal services to Canadian citizens in the official language of their choice and were to be of equal quality. Over its history, Canada has had its international borders changed several times as it has added provinces and territories, making it the world's second largest country by land area. It also shares the world's longest international border with the United States. It's about 5,525 miles long. Most of the Canadian population live within 150 miles of the nation's southern boundary, consisting of the Great Lakes of the St. Lawrence lowlands between Windsor, Ontario, and the city of Quebec, leaving the vast majority of the country's territory as sparsely populated wilderness. Canada's geography includes thousands of adjacent islands, more famous are Newfoundland to the east and that of the Arctic archipelago in the north. Canada is bound by Greenland to the northeast, the Arctic Ocean to the north, the Atlantic Ocean to the east, 12 states of the US to the south, the Pacific Ocean, and the United States state of Alaska to the west. Canada's population is mostly characterized as being French or English in terms of the languages they speak. Although other minority languages have been introduced into the country, this didn't affect the strength of the two languages that have been used by Canadians for centuries. The French-speaking population, also called the Francophone, covers approximately 22.8% of the Canadian population. They are mostly found in Quebec, where it is used as the official language. It's not surprising, since Quebec is an ancient French city that held on to its French values. Other popular French-speaking regions include about 1/3 of New Brunswick Province, which is a bilingual region, recognizing both English and French as their official languages, with no one surpassing the other. French is also an official language in all 3 Canadian territories, comprising the Nunavut, Yukon, and Northwest territories. The provincial governments of New Brunswick, Ontario, and Manitoba have their official languages as English, but are also required by law to provide services and other official operations in French, where its provision is justified by the number of French speakers available in the region. The English-speaking population covers about 56% of the total Canadian population, which makes it dominant. It is the native language of most Canadians outside the French-speaking regions, although the federal government provides its services and operates in both languages as a sign of inclusiveness. The language division between the French and the English Canadians is said to be the most visible cause of the tension found between the two splits. The Francophones see their language as an important part of their culture, therefore they keep fighting for its recognition and protections for decades through mass protests and political policies. Unlike the English Canadians, who view French as a secondary language and therefore do not see the need to make it of equal status with English, this created a sense of marginalization amongst the Francophones, who feel like their language, religion, and culture are merely respected. While the French-speaking Canadians are predominantly Catholic, the English-speaking part are predominantly Protestant, with denominations including Anglicanism, Presbyterianism, Baptism, and Methodism. British authorities, influenced by their Protestant roots, aimed to curtail the influence of the Catholic Church, particularly in Quebec. Catholic institutions faced restrictions, and clergy and educators often encountered various forms of persecution. Due to this development, the French-speaking Canadians created the Quebec Sovereignty Movement, which was a political movement created in the late 20th century to seek making Quebec an independent country. The movement was mostly fueled by the desire to protect the French language and cultural heritage and to gain greater control over the province's economic and political affairs. The movement gained momentum in the late 20th century. A mass vote conducted revealed that 50.58% of Quebec residents were against the objective of the movement, which ultimately led to the removal of the movement from mainstream politics. Despite the failure of this movement, it has not extinguished the desire of the Quebec residents for greater autonomy and consideration within the province. The Canadian federal government continued to introduce laws that are meant to preserve the use of the 2 official languages in the country. Some of these laws include the Official Languages in Education program, which provides territories and provinces with government funding for second language instruction and minority language education in both French and English. This means regions where French is their official language will receive funding for English as their second language instruction, and the same goes for English-speaking regions. Another step taken by the government towards the preservation of these 2 languages was the revoking of the 1969 Official Language Act, which was replaced by a new Official Language Act in 1988, and in 2005, Section 7 of the Act was amended. The amendment required all federal institutions to take positive actions towards promoting the acknowledgement and use of French and English in Canadian communities. The Act only applied to federal institutions and does not apply to territorial and provincial governments, which means each territory or province was given the liberty to choose its official language between French and English. Despite this significant language difference, Canada is still one of the most united nations in the world. One of the central pillars of Canada's unity is its current commitment to bilingualism and the protection of language rights. Canada officially recognizes both English and French as national languages. an acknowledgement enshrined in the Constitution and reinforced through policies like the Official Languages Act. This act ensures that federal services and documents are available in both languages, affirming that both English and French-speaking Canadians can access government services in their preferred language. Also, the country's approach to federalism plays a crucial role in preserving unity. The Canadian federal system grants significant autonomy to each province, allowing them to address regional issues and priorities. For example, Quebec, a predominantly French-speaking province, has the power to pass laws that protect French language and culture, including policies that mandate French signage in public spaces. This autonomy allows Quebec to maintain its unique identity within the broader Canadian framework, reducing tensions that could arise from perceived cultural or linguistic marginalization. Cultural accommodation is another vital element that strengthens Canada's unity. The country's commitment to multiculturalism goes beyond English and French relations to include Indigenous peoples and immigrant communities. This dedication to diversity and inclusion promotes respect for different languages, customs, and traditions, helping to ease potential linguistic or cultural tensions. Canada's multicultural policies create an environment where linguistic and cultural differences are not only accepted, but celebrated, supporting a society in which people from varied backgrounds feel a sense of belonging. Canada's story is one of resilience and unity in the face of diversity, with centuries-old cultural and linguistic divides blending into a unique national identity. By embracing both French and English as official languages, Canadians celebrate their diversity, seeing bilingualism as a cornerstone of their values. This commitment to inclusion extends to welcoming people from all backgrounds. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Canada's unique history. Be sure to like and subscribe for more fascinating videos.